Hello, and welcome to part 2 of lecture 3. I'm trying a new software that I hope you will like. It will allow me to animate and draw on the slides. So let's go ahead and get started, and please feel free to let me know what you think of this presentation style. All right, so our objectives are, we've been talking about photoperiodic crops, and we'll be talking about other crops. And one of the things is, have you ever wondered how the crop gets to market? And what are the steps that a grower goes through to get a crop to market? So we're going to go over the steps on scheduling a crop for market. So it's not by accident that poinsettias are ready at Thanksgiving or Christmas. It's not by accident that we have lilies at Easter, or mums for Mother's Day, or flowers for Mother's Day, or that bedding plants come out. For us in Florida, in South Florida, they come out in the wintertime, but in the rest of the country, that they come out in the spring. So you can plant them into your yard into the summer. Now, fruits and vegetables are a little different. They have their seasons where they normally grow. We can expect tomatoes in South Florida in the wintertime, whereas we can expect tomatoes in the summertime, fresh tomatoes. But we can manipulate, because we're learning that we can manipulate the growing environment in the greenhouse or in shade houses or covered agriculture to produce crops. So we can produce flowers, we can produce fruits and vegetables at any time of the year. So that by manipulating the environment, we can then force a plant to flower or produce fruit when we would like to have them. So we could have poinsettias in the spring. We could manipulate the photoperiod. We could have lilies in the fall by manipulating the photoperiod, or manipulating the temperature, or manipulating the light levels. So by knowing what the plant needs to produce flowers and fruit, we can then mimic that so we can get them to fruit or flower when they wouldn't normally be fruiting or flowering. But how do we make sure that we reach that market? Because the end result is to have a crop where we make money, the profit margin. So we want to have a crop when someone's going to want to buy it. So we want poinsettias at Christmas time. How do we know we're going to have poinsettias ready for Christmas? We're going to go through scheduling, and then we're going to go through an example. So where do you begin? Let's see. We start with the market date. So we start with the date that we want things ready. So in this example, if we want flowers ready on April 15th, that's the date we start with. Then we work backwards to find out when we need to start the plants. And we have to take into consideration all the things that have to go into produce that plant so that it's ready for that market date. But we need to know when we want them. So if we want poinsettias by Thanksgiving, that's our market date. If we want poinsettias that are in flower and look beautiful by December 1st, that's our market date. So we know what the market date is, we know when we want our plants, and then we work backwards. Normally, when we're starting out and we're thinking about production, we start with how we want to propagate the class. So a lot of times we start here when we are learning about plants and growing plants. We start with, well, I'm going to start seeds, I'm going to start cuttings. Okay, seeds take 7 to 10 weeks to germinate, or 7 to 10 days, or in some cases 7 to 10 weeks. Cuttings take 2 to 3 weeks to root, or longer. So we start with, we take a bunch of cuttings. Then we go to the second step here. Normally when we're growing plants, we transplant them. So once they've rooted or once they've grown, we transplant them. Then we might put them into a bigger pot. We might have to pinch them to stimulate branching. We might have to prune them. And then we go to this last step here of growing them on, where we will manipulate the light levels in order to have a crop. So we go through all these steps to get a crop. Now, we do that because we start from 1 and go to the 4. But when we're talking about getting a crop ready for market, we have to go in the reverse direction. So we start with the market date. Then we figure out how many weeks are we going to have to manipulate light levels, or how many weeks will this plant have to be in production. Then we figure out when we would want to pinch or prune the plant, when we would have to ideally transplant the plant, and then we end up with the date of when we have to start our cuttings or our seeds. So we're working backwards from the market date, taking into consideration all the steps that go into producing that crop. Okay, so we're talking about growing a poinsettia crop, okay? So we have our market date, December 10th. So what's the first thing you want to know? Well, first of all, I have my market date. That's number one. Okay, so this is the first thing we need to know. The second thing we need to know is what size pot I want to grow my plant in. So this is number two. Why do I want to know what size pot? Because this has a bearing on how long it's going to take for that plant to fill in that pot. So a lot of our potted ornamentals like poinsettias, lilies, mums are grown in 6-inch pots or 4-inch pots. Bedding plants are a lot of times in 4-inch pots or cell packs. Perennials are usually in 1-gallon containers. Large trees and things like that in production may be in 1 to 3 to 6-gallon containers. So how long is it going to take that plant for the root system to fill out in that pot, and how long will it take for the stems? And so the roots have to grow and then the shoots will grow. Then you have to determine how many cuttings are in the pot or how many seeds. So how many cuttings or plants in the container. Okay, so in our example, we're going to have 3 single stems. So I'm going to have 3 cuttings per 6-inch pot for a market date of December 10th. The thing is, how many weeks, especially with our short day plants, do we have to have short days? So we have to have 9 weeks of short days. So we know a little bit about, so in order to know the response group, we need to know what is the cultivar or the name of the plant, because there are published guidelines that says certain cultivars need so many weeks of short days, so many weeks of long days, depending on what the plant is. So all these flowering potted crops have response times, or a time that's needed for us to flowers. In our example, we're going with a 9-week response time. So, what else do we need to know? Well, how long will the plant have to be in production? Well, we need 4 weeks of propagation, 4 weeks of vegetative growth, and we need 9 weeks of short days. So if we were going to have a pinch in there, we would have to add a week or two for the plant to grow out of the pinch. So if we're taking unrooted cuttings, we have to give them time to root. And then we have to give them time to grow. So we need them, or if you get rooted cuttings, then you cut this time out and you start here to grow. So in our example, we probably have unrooted cuttings, so we're going to have 2 weeks for rooting, 2 weeks of growing on, 4 weeks total, 4 weeks to grow, so it gets to a decent size before we start our short days. We want the plants to be kind of big and full before they start to short days, because otherwise we have these really teeny tiny plants with flowers on them. We want the plant to fill out the pot. We want the roots to fill out the pot. So this is our market date. We then count back 9 weeks to get October 8th. That's when we want to start the short days. We count back 4 weeks to September 10th. That's when we'd want the plants in production. We count back another 4 weeks. That's when we would take our cuttings, giving the plant time to have rooted cuttings. Again, if you have a pinch or any other things in there, you have to add that time in. So you realize in order to have a plant ready for December 10th, we would have had to start the cuttings in August in order to meet that deadline of December 10th. Key points. Remember that the phytochrome far red is the active form. Phytochrome red and far red convert between the forms. And scheduling starts with the market date and works backwards.